this sort of ways of shaking people out of their limited and crusted viewpoint is what allows them to return to a more free perspective. And hopefully even shaking them so much that for a moment they are in between the walls of their own prison and just seeing the complete unity with everything, even just for a split second, through such mad and crazy means. We have ourselves a little sweet chapter opening up, which is the chapter of divine madness, or crazy wisdom, as it is also called. So we will start with a little introduction today and then give you an example of crazy wisdom, of divine madmen and madwomen, as they are called, in each of the sessions as we go from here. Maybe you've heard of this specific nuance that is especially known in the tantric context, but also in other various traditions, this nuance of saints and divine people, so to say, being endowed with a kind of craziness, a kind of madness, a kind of wildness, freedom, and so forth, that sort of sets them apart from the rest of society. Now, there are degrees, of course, of divine madness, of crazy wisdom, if you will, starting from basically anyone who is not anymore completely under the grip of social influences and expectations, being usually considered already a little crazy. Like in my family, I'm definitely the crazy one, even though I'm quite normal if you compare me to a divine mad person. And then, of course, there are degrees of how that craziness, as you develop spiritually, will become more and more intense and will express itself more and more severe. If we are talking about an enlightened master, no matter male, female, no matter which tradition, in case of that person, some sort of madness will be involved one way or another. If you think of St.Patrick sitting on the mountain and talking to the angel and refusing to eat because he's insisting that a few more souls should be released every Thursday and every Sunday, and he will not eat otherwise, there is of course a madness to that. There is, of course, a madness when our sweet Therese of Avila, the Christian nun, is in her prayer about to lift off the ground and asks all the nuns to come and jump on her so that nobody will see that she's actually levitating. But then there's also the proper divine madness expressed by certain divine beings that, for example, we call them the avadutas. Within the Tantra course, we will learn a lot more about avadutas as we go, which are the masters that sort of have it as part of their mission, as part of their godly expression, to just be completely out of the box, completely crazy, completely wild in the way that they operate. So one example is from the Zen tradition, which is from the book of George Feuerstein, a very good book. I think it's even straightforward, called Divine Madmen. So if you haven't read it, read it. It's completely full with amazing stories of various saints and godly people that would express their divine madness that they have due to their complete inner freedom that doesn't need any social norms. And this story, it goes like this. So there was a Zen monastery up on the hill, and there lived a Zen master, of course, and the Zen master would just sit with the disciples in complete silence, and just every now and again he would do like this. And then they would sit again. And then after some time, like that. And at one point, author or reporter or something, some journalist comes to the monastery and asks one of the disciples that is already for some time in the monastery, what is the main teaching of your master? And the guy, with a little bit of a smirk, he does like this. Of course, not from the most purest place inside, but in order to make a point somehow, he proceeded in this way. And now the master sees this, takes out a huge sword, and in a frenzy chops off the finger of the disciple, the finger that he just lifted. The disciple freaks out, like, this master is completely crazy, just chopped off my finger, he's bleeding, he's screaming, running down the hill away from the monastery, which for him now is the most horror place you could imagine, just trying to get out of there, And as he's halfway down the hill, he hears the master calling from behind, like, hey, hey, hey. And he looks back, and the master looks down the hill and does. And the disciple gets enlightened. So these sort of stories, they are very good depictions of the divine madness. Sure, the guy lost a finger. You might say that's not nice and maybe doesn't fit into the climate that we generally live in, but maybe for the disciple a small price to pay, as then he achieved the goal of his spiritual journey. After all, in a quite quick manner, a little bit painful, but quite quickly. There are many different ways that divine madness can express itself. For example, if you read, and I recommend it warmly, the wonderful books of the Kagyu lineage, especially the biographies of Milarepa, of Marpa, the great translator, of Naropa and of Tilopa. In Marpa's book, for example, you will see Marpa had many different encounters with spiritual masters, and he was making a lot of efforts, especially a lot of journeys, in order to meet his masters. And one of them would live beyond some lakes of poison and forests of I don't know what horrible beings and so forth. And he would just be this person covered in feathers. He would just sit by the side of a lake silently, covered in feathers. And when the disciple would come there, he would just bestow the blessing, and you would have completely wild and crazy states, but the master would not say anything. He would just sit there and look like a bird. And then every now and again offer some little token of energy that for some reason would make you have a tremendous jump in your spiritual evolution. The point with the madness of masters, may it now be completely mad, chopping off fingers, looking like a bird, and I don't know what, or may it be simply the madness that arises when you become free within your being. The point with it is basically, as you also see on the presentation, the point is that such a divine madness and the madness of such a master will push your refresh button, if you will. It just allows for all the accumulated selfish agendas that we have within society, even if we live by, some nice norms as well. We want to be mostly, not killing each other. In a certain frame, we want to be honest with each other, and we have some generally good ideas of things. But they are usually mashed up with a whole lot of selfish agenda, with a whole lot of stuff that the ego wants to acquire, and they harden us even into dogmatic beliefs. When we look into the religious realm, for example, you start with something good, like, for example, a concept of purity. But then you become so puritanic that you forbid even some wonderful ecstatic means of achieving enlightenment. For example, wonderful lovemaking, as we know in Tantra. And it becomes a huge thing, and then everybody has to do it under wraps with their little phone in the corner watching some porn, because we are not addressing the problem heads on. And the madness that we talk about when speaking about the awakening of Sahasrara, which also leads, of course, for a master to become a master, that madness is simply the, let's say, fire that frees us from all these dogmatic ways of religion, from the crusts of society, from, all the, let's say, shields and armors that occur when a lot of egos sit in one place, which is what society basically is in the end of the day. So sages and saints sort of inspire society to return to the divine law. If you look, for example, in the Bible, that was the role of the prophets, and the prophets, they were quite wild. They would stand there and curse Jerusalem and I don't know what, and be quite harsh with their predictions and with their analogies of how horrible Jerusalem is and how terrible is Israel, and they are all whores and they are all robbers and bandits and thieves. And this sort of ways of shaking people out of their limited and crusted viewpoint is what allows them to return to a more free perspective. And hopefully even shaking them so much that for a moment they are in between the walls of their own prison and just seeing the complete freedom, the complete unity with everything, even just for a split second, through such mad and crazy means. Like the guy who got the finger chopped off, for a moment, he was in the Zen state. For a moment, he just bleeped out of illusion. And that was enough. One little moment. And this is what the divine mad people offer to us as a whole, as a humanity. The rule that implies is, of course, that the divine mad person, the masters, the saints, the prophets, will be willing to completely discard social rules. That is the whole thing of it. Otherwise, they cannot free the group that they are in. They need to be out of the box. So therefore, no matter what master you meet, the master will be out of the box. If the master is in the box, it's not a master. You cannot have a master that doesn't rub society the wrong way. It's not possible, because society is not aligned with the divine law, is not aligned with complete freedom, is not aligned with the godly attributes and godly ways. So therefore, it is unthinkable to have an enlightened being that is not, in one way or another, having troubles with society. And history has proven this over thousands of years. No matter if in the last century with Yogananda, or in few thousand years ago, killing each other in large numbers just due to beliefs and convictions, even heartful and wonderful ones like the Christian martyrs and so forth. When you get a certain freedom of a spiritual nature, society will not be matching with you anymore. And then the more waves you make within society, for example, the more followers you might attract, the more trouble you will have. That is for sure. The only way to relate and even discover the divinity within such madness, the wisdom within that craziness, is through the compass of the heart. So the disciple is only ready to acknowledge the master and to receive that wisdom, that goodness, that wonder, if the heart is awakened. If the disciple can only see through the glasses of social norms, it will be impossible to truly connect to the master. When the disciple starts to look with the heart, even if he cannot really understand the master, a wonderful example of this is the biography of Milarepa, where he goes through so much hardship with his master, Marpa, the great translator. And Milarepa doesn't understand. He thinks the master hates him and is just doing it to make his life miserable. And Marpa puts Milarepa on all these trials and ordeals, and he has to build houses and tear them back down. And then the master comes and is completely drunk and destroys what he was doing and beats him up and all sorts of crazy things. And Milarepa is convinced that the master must really, really hate me, but I feel in my heart it is the right thing to follow. And in this difficult process, Milarepa was cleaned from a horrible karma of having actually killed 36 people by the means of black magic in that very life, and still managed to get liberated, which was only possible through this quite mild suffering in comparison what he did to other people. So the madness can only be understood through the heart. It would be, well, it would be really crazy to just follow the madness of someone without understanding at all what is happening, at least intuitively, from the depth of your heart. So the bridge between the complete divine freedom, the bridge that looks quite mad and that then reaches down to the one that wishes to go for that complete freedom, it's made of the strings of our own heart and the profound feeling that what we are called for is actually making us more and more blissful, more and more happy, more and more profoundly connected with the depth of our being, even if the means might sometimes look a bit funny. Now, one good point to remember is, if you want to be on your way towards divine madness, first become divine and then become mad. Don't do it the other way around. If you start with the crazy part, that might very well where you will just get stuck. So, of course, first, great efforts, moving towards perfection, lots of practice, following the rules and laws from the scriptures to the T with the greatest detail. Then, when we have fully accomplished the systems of spiritual knowledge, spiritual practice, then we are free of them. Then we can transcend them. Like the wonderful one that we will be talking about today, Drukpa Kunle, like in his case, he is really known as the complete divine madman. But basically the first page of his biography simply says, Drukpa Kunle practiced like crazy. He was just practicing, meditating, effort, discipline. And then he got liberated, and that's where the story begins. And then begins all the wild adventures that the divine madman Drukpa Kunle was going through. Oftentimes people forget this part, and they're like, ooh, interesting, a story about divine madness. And then you hear, for example, the stories of Drukpa Kunle out of context, which, yes, they are very wild. And then we have all sorts of speculations. Oh, yes, he was trying to say this with that, and so, no, and it has to be interpreted like this. But what people forget when they make their speculations about this person is that he practiced really wildly until he was clean like a diamond. And from that cleanliness, from that complete control, complete perfection of one's own being, then he could be completely free and completely crazy, expressing himself in order to, again, shake up society, shake up certain beliefs, show people that God, that the divine is actually to be found in anything whatsoever. In the end of the day, we shouldn't forget that the actions of a divine madman will be actions inspired by compassion. Any master that walks this earth, or any other planet for that matter, is a bodhisattva, is a manifestation of the highest into the creation with the risk of losing themselves. These are beings that have struggled their way out of illusion and are now willingly stepping back into it, compassionately full of love, in order to free the ones that are still trapped into their little prisons of ego and mind. And then they will even take the risk of having a lot of trouble in society, of being scolded and scornfully treated and judged and laughed about, just in order to give us the possibility to be just even a millimeter more free than before. So this is a little introduction to the divine madness. Hey guys, if you like this video, make sure to like and subscribe to our YouTube channel for more content on spirituality, tantra and more.
And if you want to sign up for our online classes or for our retreats, you can see our website on the description below.